Sunlight filtered through the silent forest as the little homeless boy froze, spotting a man bound tightly to the rusted railway tracks. His tiny heartbeat thundered louder than the distant wind, sensing danger in the man's trembling face and desperate, pleading eyes. The ropes were coarse and unforgiving, digging into the millionaire's suit, leaving him helpless as fear twisted across his tear-stained cheeks. The boy stepped closer, barefoot on cold metal, feeling the trembling rails beneath him, whispering a warning he didn't understand. A faint hum rose in the distance, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if it already knew the horror rushing toward them. Tears streamed down the man's face as he begged with shaking breaths. But the boy only clutched the rope with trembling, determined fingers. The rattling tracks vibrated harder now, each pulse echoing the boy's panic as he tugged desperately at the tight, stubborn knots. Birds scattered from the treetops, their shrill cries slicing through the forest like an omen of something terrible drawing near. The man's voice cracked with terror, yet the boy refused to step back, pulling again with every ounce of strength in his tiny arms. Dust swirled in warm shafts of light as urgency tightened around them like an invisible grip neither could escape. A shadow stretched across the tracks, long and foreboding, warning that time was slipping through the boy's trembling hands. And with one final, desperate pull, the rope loosened, just as a distant steel thunder roared closer through the whispering woods. The boy stumbled backward as the rope slipped free, but the millionaire could barely move, his limbs numb from fear and pressure. He gasped for breath, trying to rise, but the track shook violently now, warning that the oncoming train was no longer far away. The child grabbed the man's sleeve with both hands, his tiny fingers digging in as he pulled with frantic, quivering strength. Leaves fluttered across the tracks like frantic messengers, urging them to flee before the growing rumble swallowed everything. The millionaire's knees buckled beneath him, forcing the boy to tug and cry harder as panic dried the tears on his dusty cheeks. A low horn bellowed through the forest, trembling the air, sending a jolt of terror straight through the helpless man's chest. The boy's breath hitched as he looked down the tracks, seeing the faint glint of something massive barreling their way. Each second stretched thinner than the rope that once held the man captive, threatening to snap under the weight of dread. With a final trembling push, the millionaire managed to kneel, but his legs felt like anchors refusing to lift off the rails. The boy screamed at him with desperate cries, though his voice was lost in the rising thunder shaking the silent forest. A gust of wind whipped through the trees, carrying the metallic roar of wheels scraping the rails like knives on steel. And just as fear began to crush what hope remained, the boy spotted a forgotten opening in the woods they might still reach. The boy grabbed the man's arm again, digging his heels into gravel as he pulled him toward the narrow path between the trees. Every step felt impossible, the trembling tracks begging them to hurry before the monstrous engine devoured the distance. The millionaire stumbled, falling to one knee, his suit torn and dirtied as he fought to keep up with the child's tiny strides. The boy's sobbing breaths echoed through the forest, yet he refused to let go, clutching the man like his life depended on it. Behind them the train horn screamed again, this time so close the ground shook like a heartbeat out of control. Sunlight flickered across the rails, illuminating the streak of metal racing toward them with deadly certainty. The forest seemed to blur as fear surged through the man, reminding him how fragile a life becomes when tied to fate. The boy tugged harder, and the man finally rose, legs trembling violently as he forced himself to follow the child's lead. They stumbled off the first rail, then the second, each step tearing them away from the jaws of the approaching disaster. Gravel scattered beneath their feet as momentum carried them forward, adrenaline blazing brighter than fear. Their shadows danced wildly across the ground, stretched thin by the blazing headlight now flooding the silent forest. And just as they cleared the final rail, the train erupted into view, screaming through the tracks like a steel beast unleashed. The blast of wind from the speeding train slammed into them, knocking the boy off balance and sending him rolling on the dirt. The millionaire dropped beside him, shielding the child as debris and dust shot into the air like shards of wild energy. The train thundered past, shaking the earth so violently the surrounding trees swayed as though bowing to its brutal force. The boy pressed his hands to his ears, eyes squeezed shut, tears mixing with dirt as the noise pierced the calm forest air. The man watched the steel blur fly by, realizing how close death had been, close enough to taste its cold breath. The roar faded slowly, leaving only the trembling rustle of leaves and the shallow panting of two shaken survivors. The millionaire looked down at the child, confused by the bravery that had come from someone so small and so alone. The boy sat up, sniffing weakly, still trembling from the terror that had nearly swallowed them both completely. Sunlight broke through the trees again, soft and warm, as though the forest itself sighed with relief at their escape. The man reached out with a shaky hand, brushing dust from the boy's cheek, his heart twisting with unexpected gratitude. The boy glanced back at the empty tracks, haunted by the echo of the train that had nearly claimed them forever. And in that moment, the millionaire knew this child had saved far more than his life. He had shattered something dark within him. Silence settled across the forest, broken only by the boy's shaky breaths and the rustling leaves whispering around them. The millionaire swallowed hard, realizing he owed everything to a child who had nothing, not even shoes to protect his feet. The boy looked up, eyes wide and uncertain, unsure if he had done something right or stumbled into danger by accident. The man gently took the child's hand, feeling the tiny fingers still trembling with the remnants of raw fear and courage. He tried to speak, but the weight of unspoken gratitude tightened around his throat, silencing every practiced word. The boy tilted his head, waiting, confused by the tears now forming in the eyes of the man he had just saved. Sunbeams danced through the branches, illuminating the pair as though the forest wanted to witness what came next. The millionaire finally found his voice. Though it cracked with emotion he could no longer hide or control. He whispered a heartfelt thank you, realizing no amount of wealth could ever repay the bravery shown by tiny hands. The boy blinked, unfamiliar with such words, yet sensing their warmth and sincerity in the man's trembling tone. The forest grew still once more, holding the moment gently, aware that the world had shifted for both survivor and savior. But neither knew that this unlikely rescue was only the beginning of a story that would shock everyone who heard it. The millionaire steadied himself, brushing dirt from his suit as the boy clung to his sleeve, still shaking from the ordeal. The forest felt different now, quiet, heavy, like it was waiting for a truth buried deeper than the tracks they escaped from. The man kneeled to the child's level, noticing the torn, faded onesie and the tiny feet scratched by gravel and broken twigs. The boy's eyes reflected hunger, fear, and something even heavier, the loneliness of a life lived without protection. Questions swirled in the man's mind. Why was he alone? Why was he out here? Who left him wandering these dangerous woods? The child pointed back toward the direction he came from, but the path was nothing more than shadows tangled in tall trees. The millionaire felt a cold shiver, realizing danger might not have ended. Someone had tied him there for a reason, And if the boy had stumbled upon him, maybe someone else had planned to return before the train finished the job. The man scanned the trees, heart pounding again, sensing unseen eyes watching from the darkened edges of the forest. The boy tugged his sleeve urgently, urging him away from the tracks, as though he sensed something lurking too. They stepped deeper into the woods together, every crack of twigs sounding like footsteps trying to stay hidden. The forest no longer felt like a place of escape. It felt like a trap tightening with every cautious step they took. They moved slowly along the uneven forest path, the millionaire guiding the boy while glancing over his shoulder constantly. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the boy's soft sniffles and the distant rustle of branches swaying warily. The man noticed faint footprints in the dirt, large ones, leading in the same direction the boy had come from earlier. His breath caught as he realized these tracks were fresh, pressed deep as if someone heavy had passed through recently. The boy gripped his hand tighter, trembling, hinting that whoever made them was someone he feared returning to. Sunlight dimmed as clouds drifted overhead, turning the woods into a maze of shadows stretching like long warning fingers. A crow screeched above them, startling both as its cry echoed like a signal reaching something hidden in the trees. The millionaire felt his pulse race, aware that danger might not be the train. They might be stepping toward something darker. A sudden crack sounded behind them, like a boot crushing a dry branch, freezing them in place instantly. The man pulled the boy close, scanning the forest with sharp, frantic eyes, searching for any hint of movement. The forest went still, unnaturally still, as though holding its breath before something emerged from the shadows. And just as the man took a cautious step back, another branch snapped, this time much closer than before. The millionaire swallowed hard, instinct screaming that whoever stalked them had no intention of staying hidden for long. He lifted the boy into his arms, deciding speed was their only chance, then bolted through the trees as fear fueled each step. Branches whipped against his sleeves, leaves sliced past, and the forest blurred as adrenaline pushed him to run harder. Behind them, the sound of someone crashing through the undergrowth echoed like a predator reclaiming what it had lost. The boy buried his face into the man's shoulder, whimpering softly as each thundering step behind them drew closer. The millionaire's breaths grew shallow, his legs burning, but he refused to slow. This child had saved him, now he must save him too. They burst through a cluster of low branches, stumbling into a clearing where sunlight carved sharp lines across the ground. But the footsteps didn't stop. They grew louder, faster, like whoever followed them was sprinting with violent determination. The man turned sharply, racing toward a fallen tree that provided a narrow path beneath its massive rotting trunk. He squeezed through with the boy, scraping his shoulders on the bark, desperate to put any obstacle between them and danger. A shadow flashed behind them, tall, swift, unmistakably human, closing the distance at a terrifying speed. The millionaire ducked behind a large oak, holding the boy close, praying the pounding footsteps would rush past them. The forest pulsed with tension as both held their breath, listening as the footsteps slowed, prowling the clearing like a hunter. The man's heart hammered against the boy's back, terrified the sound alone might give away their hiding place. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the faint whisper of leaves brushing together under a shifting breeze. Then a voice echoed through the woods, cold, low, searching, calling out as if expecting an answer from the boy. The millionaire felt the child flinch, clinging tighter, confirming that sinister familiarity was behind that chilling voice. The man tilted his head, carefully studying the shadow pacing across the clearing, its movements sharp and restless. The stranger kicked at the fallen trunk, cursing under his breath, frustrated at losing sight of his intended victims. The boy trembled uncontrollably, eyes squeezed shut, as though remembering something terrible tied to that voice. The man gently covered the boy's mouth, fearing a single cry could reveal their position to the stalking stranger. Minutes crawled by like hours as the shadow's pacing slowly shifted to angry stomping deeper into the woods. Finally, the footsteps faded completely, swallowed by distance, leaving only the whisper of wind as proof he was gone. But the man knew he hadn't gone far. He could feel it. This threat would return sooner or later, and with purpose. The millionaire exhaled shakily, lifting the frightened boy into his arms as they cautiously emerged from behind the oak. The clearing felt eerie now, holding the ghost of a danger that had slipped back into the shadows but hadn't disappeared. He scanned every corner of the forest, aware that whoever hunted them wasn't finished. This was only the beginning. The boy tugged at his shirt, pointing toward a distant dirt road barely visible through gaps between the tall trees. It was their only chance, a path that might lead them to safety, away from the tracks and the man hunting in silence. They hurried toward it, the millionaire shielding the child while glancing behind every few steps for any returning shadow. His mind raced, realizing this boy had more secrets than his tiny frame could hold, secrets someone wanted buried forever. As they neared the edge of the forest, sunlight widened, warming the ground like a promise of hope beyond the darkness. The boy leaned into him, trust replacing some of the terror, as though believing this stranger could protect him now. The millionaire tightened his grip, silently vowing that nothing, not train, not forest, not hunter, would ever harm him again. But deep in the woods, a pair of unseen eyes watched their escape, burning with fury and unfinished intentions. And what the boy revealed next about who hunted them would shock the world far more than their escape ever could.